Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wished for, maybe, a shortcut? A way to truly understand the foundational ideas that shape our world.
Hmm.
Not just what people say about them, but what they actually mean.
Yeah, getting to the core.
Exactly. Today, we're diving deep into the profound world of phenomenology. It's a philosophical approach that, honestly, promises to clarify the very ground beneath our feet.
Especially when it comes to science.
Yeah.
And just our everyday experience.
Absolutely. It's about peeling back the layers of assumption, layers we don't even know are there sometimes, to see how we build our understanding, often without even realizing it.
Indeed. And our mission for this deep dive really is to explore the rich, complex, and I think surprisingly practical themes and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The philosophy presented in Edmund Husserl's Phenomenology and the Foundations of the Sciences.
Which people often call Ideen, yeah.
That's the one, Ideen. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical treatise for, the ivory tower.
Right.
It's a really rigorous exploration of how our consciousness actively shapes our understanding of reality and how that process lays the indisputable groundwork for all scientific inquiry.
Like the operating manual for how we know anything.
That's a great way to put it. The ultimate operating manual for how we know what we know.
So whether you're curious about how scientists build their understanding or maybe how we perceive the world around us, or you just love a good aha moment that kind of reframes everything.
And this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah. We'll be navigating some admittedly incredibly dense material, but it's rewarding stuff. We want to bring out the most important nuggets of insight without getting lost in, impenetrable jargon.
Mm-hmm. Keep it clear.
Our goal is to make these foundational concepts not just understandable, but genuinely resonant. You should feel it click.
We're going to try and strip away assumptions, question what we think we know, and really delve into the essence of phenomena.
The essence, that's a key word already.
It is. Connecting the dots between how we experience the world and how rigorous, truly foundational knowledge is built. So yeah, get ready to shift your perspective.
On reality itself.
On how reality presents itself to us and how we, in turn, make sense of it. It's a two-way street.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Section 1. Phenomenology's foundational distinctions. The regions of reality. Husserl, in Ideen 3, starts by inviting us to notice something fundamental, right?
Yeah, something intuitively given in our lived experience. It actually precedes all scientific thinking.
Before we even start measuring or theorizing.
Exactly. He's like a master cartographer of consciousness, identifying these three primary regions or types of objects that inherently structure our world.
Okay, what are they?
The merely material thing, the animate organism, and the psyche or psychic ego.
Material thing, animate organism, psyche. Got it.
And this isn't just an academic categorization,
Yeah.
It's where Husserl lays the absolute groundwork for understanding how different kinds of knowledge are even possible.
This is where it gets really interesting, you said, because they're not just arbitrary labels.
That's right. What's fascinating here is that these aren't categories we just invent or impose. They're not like library classifications.
Okay.
Each region is correlated, a priori meaning inherently, before experience, with a distinct way of experiencing it.
A specific way we encounter each one.
Yes, and consequently, each gives rise to a distinct science or family of sciences. When we say a priori, we mean these connections are built into the very structure of how we can possibly experience these regions, even before any specific observation.
So it's like the fundamental rulebook for our perception.
That's a good analogy. And this is the first stage of what Husserl calls reduction to foundations. We're moving away from those taken-for-granted assumptions to grasp the essential structure of experience.
Before we theorize or experiment.
Exactly. He's already hinting at his phenomenological kinetic method here, which traces how these distinctions dynamically unfold from their primal sources in our lived experience. It's a journey into the how of our world-making.
So we're talking truly foundational stuff, almost like the universal grammar of reality, you could say.
In a way, yes.
Let's break them down then, starting with the most basic, the material thing.
Right. This is what Husserl means by Ding or Körper, a body in the purely physical sense.
Like?
A stone, a table, a star, a planet. Anything purely physical. When you look at a cup on your desk, you perceive it as a material thing.
Okay. Seems straightforward.
But its unity isn't just a simple, immediate givenness. It emerges from a particular type and nexus of constitutive acts in our consciousness.
What does constitutive acts mean here?
It means our consciousness actively constructs its coherence. It's not just passively receiving cup, it's synthesizing various perspectives, sensory inputs, expectations.
So it's not just there. We're sort of building it in our awareness.
We are actively constituting it as a unified object. And this fundamental way of experiencing material objects with their spatial, temporal, and causal properties gives rise to what we know as physical science, primarily physics.
Because physics deals with space, time, cause, and effect in matter.
Precisely. And he's careful to distinguish this material perception from just external perception generally. Because as we'll see, an animate organism also involves external perception, but it's different.
Okay, so that's the material thing. What's the next region?
The second region is the animate organism, which Husserl refers to as Leib. And this is a really critical distinction.
Live versus Körper or Ding.
Exactly. It's distinct from a mere physical body, Körper, or thing, Ding. Imagine stubbing your toe.
Ow.
The Körper is the physical stuff, the bone, the flesh, the blood. It's the object that's observable from the outside, measurable, subject to physical laws.
The doctor sees the Körper.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Leib is the aching sensation, the felt vulnerability, the experience of your toe from the inside. That's the crucial difference Husserl is pointing to.
How we live our bodies versus how we merely observe them as objects.
Precisely. Our experience of a Leib is fundamentally different because it embodies sensation. It expresses itself.
Yeah.
It's perceived as a living, sensing entity, not just an inert object.
And this peculiar form of experience where sensation is integral, that leads somewhere specific.
Yes. It conceptually leads to a science Husserl calls somatology. Now, he admits this wasn't a well-established science in his time.
Not like physics or biology.
No, but he argues it's conceptually necessary to explore the organism's specific sensitivities, things like the tactual field as the primal field of localization.
Meaning how we know where we are touched.
Exactly, that basic sense of bodily location, or hot-cold sensations. These are manifestations of the organism's sensitivity, not just physical properties.
So it's about the sensing itself.
Right. And he points out that while plants are organisms, somatology struggles with them. Why? Because they lack the clear psychic dimension of animals that would allow us to pose specific somatological questions with the same clarity.
We don't really interpret a plant's feelings in the same way we might a dog's.
Exactly. Their life is of a different order for this kind of analysis.
Okay, so somatology investigates the body as lived, the body that senses and feels, distinct from the body as just a physical object.
You got it.
And finally, the third region.
The psyche, or psychic ego. This is the realm of consciousness itself. Our thoughts, feelings, perceptions, our very I.
The inner world.
Yes. And it's distinct yet again. It builds upon the animate organism, naturally, but it has its own unique characteristics. And the existence and nature of the psyche give rise to psychology.
Material thing, physics, animate organism, somatology, conceptually. Psyche, their psychology.
That's the framework. From these basic, intuitively graspable distinctions, the material thing, the sensing body, the conscious Husserl meticulously builds this framework for understanding how different sciences emerge, each rooted in these distinct types of experience and their unique causal relations.
But how does he define these realms more deeply? What makes them fundamentally different in terms of how we understand them scientifically, especially regarding causality? Let's dig into that material world first. Physics and this idea of inseparable causality.
Right. So for Husserl, material things, as explored by physics, are constituted in a uniform spatial, temporal, causal interconnection. They exist in space, unfold over time, and affect each other causally.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Their objectivity, the fact that they are genuinely out there for everyone, not just my private illusion, relies on the mutual understanding and validation of multiple experiencing egos. We agree on the rock being there.
Intersubjectivity plays a role even here.
Absolutely. But here's the truly radical part, the core of this section. He argues that the cognition of reality and the cognition of causality are inseparably one.
Wait, inseparable. You can't know reality without knowing causality.
That's what he's saying for the material world. Reality, in this physical sense, is not some isolated, independent entity just sitting there. It is fundamentally relative. It exists only within its causal relations.
So a material thing isn't just there waiting to be observed. Its being is tied up with how it affects and is affected by everything else.
Exactly. It's part of a vast, interconnected web. And to try and conceive of a material thing outside of this causal web would be, for Husserl, well, he bluntly calls it nonsense.
Wow. Okay, this is huge. It's not just a philosophical technicality. It feels like a radical rewiring of how we think about anything physical.
It really is.
Husserl is basically saying a thing isn't a standalone entity with intrinsic properties just sitting there. Its very being is defined by its relationships, its causal dance with everything else.
Think about it. Trying to isolate a substance from its effects.
Hmm.
He says it's like trying to have a shadow without an object. It's meaningless.
So he's challenging traditional metaphysical ideas like Descartes' the extended stuff that just is.
Precisely. He's pushing back against the idea of independent substances that simply exist without necessarily needing to interact causally with others. Husserl states it very clearly. It is fundamentally essential to reality as such not to have a proper essence of that sort at all. Rather, it is what it is only in its causal relations.
It is what it is only in its causal relations. That's a powerful line.
And he continues, it is something fundamentally relative, which demands its corresponding members. A thing needs its causal partners to be what it is.
So if the cognition of reality and causality are inseparable, does that mean Husserl is essentially doing away with any notion of a truly independent thing in itself? That Kantian idea of something existing prior to our engagement with it? How radical is this shift for philosophy?
It is profoundly radical. He's essentially saying that the very concept of an isolated substance existing in splendid self-sufficiency is a philosophical illusion, at least for the material world, as understood by physics.
The world is its causal connections.
As grasped by physical science, yes. Take the cognition of a tree, for instance. It isn't just about seeing its shape, its color, its texture. That's part of it, sure.
But not the whole story.
Not at all. It's fundamentally about understanding its growth, its interaction with sunlight, soil, water, gravity, other forces. Its essence, as a material thing, is its causal web, its dynamic participation in a larger system.
So discovering causal relationships isn't secondary. It's not something we figure out after we've identified the object.
No, according to Husserl, it defines the real. Scientific investigation isn't just describing static properties, it's an ever-renewed penetration into the real causal connections.
So even when we perceive a tree as just given, simply there.
Husserl notes that its causally determining circumstances initially remain vague, implicit. We don't see the photosynthesis or the root absorption immediately. Science steps in to make these explicit, to determine conceptually this causal web, and in doing so, it sharpens our understanding of the tree's reality.
Give me another example. A rock.
Okay, a rock sitting on the ground. We perceive its mass, its hardness, its shape. But for Husserl, its reality also fundamentally includes its gravitational pull, its resistance to being moved, its potential to break if struck, its interaction with erosion over time.
All its potential interactions.
And its actual ones.
Yeah.
If you remove those causal possibilities and actualities, what's left? Not a rock as a real thing, but maybe a mere abstract placeholder, an empty concept.
So physics, for Husserl, isn't simply describing what's there. It's unraveling the intricate causal threads that bind material things together and, in doing so, defining what those things are.
That's the core idea. His statement that all science of the real is causally explanatory, if it actually, in the sense of objective validity, wants to determine what the real is absolutely central to his view of scientific rigor for this domain.
If you remove the causal relations, the substance loses its very meaning as a real thing. It dissolves into an unintelligible abstraction.
Exactly. And zooming out for a moment, the broader implications here are massive. Well, this understanding of material reality sets the stage. It establishes a baseline of interconnectedness and relationality. This baseline will be recontextualized and deepened as we move up the hierarchy of being to the animate organism and the psyche. They build upon it, but they bring their own distinct characteristics and unique forms of causality.
So this clarifies the kind of causality we're dealing with at the physical level before we even get to the more complex forms in life and mind.
Precisely. It's a foundational layer.
Okay, let's move up then to animate organisms, the libe, and this idea of somatology.
Right. So we move from the purely material to the animate organism. And this is where sensation comes into play in a unique way, making it fundamentally distinct from a purely material thing.
The sense and body.
Yes. And Husserl talks about somatology as a necessary science for understanding this realm, but he admits it wasn't really a recognized field in his time.
Right, you mentioned that. Why was that? And how does this conceptually necessary science fit into his larger philosophical schema?
That's a crucial point that immediately springs to mind. Somatology, as Husserl envisions it, investigates the animate organism's specific sensitivities. Things like, as we said, the tactual field as the primal field of localization, that basic sense of touch and where it is on the body, or hot-cold sensations.
The qualitative feel of the body's experience.
Exactly. Now, an animate organism is also a physical entity, right? So it certainly relies on material science for understanding its physical properties, its Körper aspect.
It's mechanics, it's chemistry.
Sure. But specific somatology reveals a new, basic form of experience. The challenge Husserl identified in making it a recognized field was precisely differentiating it cleanly enough from physics, dealing with pure matter, and traditional biology, which might focus more on functions, evolution, classifications.
Where does it fit?
And he specifically notes the difficulty in understanding plants within this framework. He observes that the obvious kinship between brute and plant does not go so far that a definite interpretation of the plant as an animate organism has become possible.
Why not?
Because plants lack that clear, readily interpretable psychic dimension that we see in animals. This makes it harder to pose specific somatological problems, questions about their inner sensitive life, with the same clarity and intuitive access we might feel we have with an animal. Their life seems to be of a different order in this respect.
Interesting. So somatology is about the organism as sensing, as experiencing its own body from within, rather than just a collection of physical properties observable from the outside.
That's the heart of it. The difference between a tree and an animal is stark in this context. We don't typically attribute sensations like pain or warmth to a tree in the same way we intuitively do to an animal, even a very simple one.
And sensation for Husserl stands where exactly?
He says it stands at the boundary between the animate organism and the psyche. It's the bridge, in a way. In somatology, sensation is seen as a manifestation of the animate organism's sensitivity.
It's not just a physical reaction like a chemical process.
No, it's a lived experience. It has a specific qualitative character, the redness of red, the sharpness of pain.
And this leads to how we understand others, doesn't it? You mentioned empathy.
Yes, and this is where the concept of empathy,
Yeah.
I get to him, becomes absolutely crucial for understanding other animate organisms. This is how we primarily grasp alien animate organisms.
How does it work?
We begin by experiencing sensations in our own body, right? We know what pain feels like, what warmth feels like. Then we perform a somatic interpretation, Eidetic, to understand the sensations of others.
Like projecting our experience onto them.
In a structured way, yes. Think of seeing a dog yelp and pull back its paw after stepping on something sharp.
Yeah.
We interpret that physical reaction, the yelp, the pulling back, as an experience of pain and sensation because we correlate it with our own capacity to feel pain when we're pricked or injured.
We assume a similar inner experience based on the outward signs.
Right. Husserl uses the term Einditung here to highlight his early approach to intersubjectivity. It's an interpretation that lends to this interpretation the character of an experience that may confirm itself through further similar empirical apprehensions and positings, may determine itself more precisely, and perhaps rectify itself, in short, legitimate itself.
So it's not guesswork, it's a kind of experience itself, though indirect.
Exactly. It's not genuine originary being given. We don't feel the dog's pain directly. We can't. But it's a being given by means of a kind of representation, a projection based on our own embodied experience. We're essentially building a bridge of understanding through our shared bodily capacities for sensation.
So somatology is about the body as lived, the body that senses and feels, distinct from the body as a mere physical object. It's this unique realm of lived sensation that Husserl argues we need a specific science to explore.
Correct.
And this leads us directly to the next layer, the psyche itself, which interacts with these sensations in an even more complex way.
That's right. The animate organism, through its sensitivities, provides the raw material, you could say, the feeling stratum for psychic life. But the psyche's causality and mode of being are fundamentally different again.
Okay, let's tackle the psyche, the third region.
Right. So, having navigated the material and the animate, we arrive at the psyche. This is the reality that has its sets of states under the heading of consciousness.
Thoughts, feelings, beliefs, memories.
All of that. And while it's intimately interwoven with the animate organism's sensation states, remember, sensation is on the boundary between them. The psyche possesses a distinct causal nexus. its own way of causing and being caused.
And you mentioned a key differentiator here.
Yes. Unlike material or even organismal realities, the psyche has a necessarily developmental character and cannot, in principle, revert to the same state. This is a profound difference. It sets it apart from anything we've discussed so far.
This is a truly key insight, isn't it? And it's something I think many of us intuitively grasp, but maybe rarely articulate clearly.
I think so too.
Think about it. A physical object, like a pendulum, can theoretically return to a previous state if you reproduce the identical conditions, right?
Theoretically, yes.
Even an animate organism's sensations. You could argue they can be considered in reproducible ways under identical material conditions. Prick it in the same place with the same force, you'd expect a similar somatic response, roughly.
Roughly, yes. Focusing purely on the somatic level.
But you, your psyche, your consciousness, you can't revert to being the child you once were, not with identical thoughts, feelings, beliefs, memories.
Impossible.
Your experiences, your history, the very flow of your conscious life fundamentally change you. This is what Husserl means by the fundamental impossibility, the unchanging persistence of the psyche, and at one with it, the fundamental impossibility of a return to the same state for the psyche.
Precisely. He uses that powerful example. An aged person's psyche attempting to develop backward to that of a child is, in principle, excluded by the psyche's own specific character. It's necessarily developmental character.
It's a one-way street of becoming. You can't unlearn, unexperience, unfeel in that total way.
Exactly. And this highlights that a human being as a reality is this deeply interwoven tapestry. It includes the material animate thing, the Körper, with its live aspect, which then becomes a full human being through the psychic stratum, intimately interwoven with that feeling stratum.
Three realities intermingled: a material, animate sensitivity, and conscious psyche.
Yes, each successive one bringing in a new stratum of complexity and unique properties. Psychic causality, then, relates specifically to these psychic states.
How one thought leads to another, how memories influence perceptions.
Exactly. How desires shape actions, how experiences shape our permanent dispositions. It's not about the material cause of the initial sensations, that's more somatology, but the causality within the psychic context itself, the flow of consciousness.
And this developmental, non-repeatable nature, does that lead to another distinction within the psyche itself? You mentioned the pure ego versus the empirical ego earlier.
Yes, that's another crucial distinction. Not everything psychic is necessarily egoical in the sense of being actively directed by the I. For example, associations can form in your mind, like a tune getting stuck in your head, almost automatically.
Without your conscious effort.
Right. The pure ego, for Husserl, is the identical unitary subject of cogitations, the unchanging I that performs acts of consciousness, the constant pole of all our experiences. It's the sheer capacity for awareness, the I think, that accompanies all thoughts.
The witness.
In a sense, yes. But then, this pure ego undergoes what Husserl calls realizing apprehension when it's related to real circumstances. That means it becomes tied to an experienced living human being in the world. And then it becomes an empirical ego.
So the pure I becomes the me in the world.
That's a good way to think about it. This empirical ego is the I you get to know through ongoing experience. It's always acquiring new dispositions, developing a personality, accumulating a history. This is how the pure ego becomes a real ego, which, belonging to this animate organism, enlivening it and depending on it, comports itself with relation to an interchange of real circumstances in an appropriate manner.
It gets integrated into the objective world.
Exactly. This realizing apprehension connects it to the animate organism. And this is also why, from a natural scientific viewpoint, Husserl argues against the idea of a communal psyche.
A group mind.
Yes. He pushes back against ideas of a collective consciousness that somehow transcends individual psyches. For him, in this natural scientific context, it's always about individual human beings with individual psyches. They're connected, of course, through individual acts that are intentionally directed at something psychically external, communication, interaction.
But no supermind emerges.
Not in this natural scientific view. There are only individual humans and brutes with their individual psyches influencing and understanding each other. This is crucial for maintaining the integrity and distinctness of individual consciousness as the primary locus of psychic reality.
Okay. So we've mapped out these three fundamental regions of reality: the material, the animate, and the psychic. We have explored their interconnections, their specific causal relations, their unique modes of being constituted in our consciousness.
A complex, layered picture.
Definitely. But this layered understanding isn't just descriptive, is it? Now, how does phenomenology as a method allow us to see these distinctions clearly and build true, rigorous knowledge, especially when conventional science might sometimes overlook or conflate these foundational aspects? That brings us to section 2, the foundational method, eidetic intuition and clarification.
Right. Having established these regions of reality, the next crucial step is indeed asking, how do we actually come to know them in a rigorous foundational way?
Beyond just observing facts.
Exactly. This brings us to phenomenology's core method, which operates in what Husserl calls the eidetic attitude.
Eidetic, what does that mean?
It means we shift our focus. We don't focus primarily on factual existence, what is in the concrete world right now, but on essence.
Essence, meaning what something can be or must be for it to be what it is.
Precisely. A single datum of experience, like perceiving a specific object, serves only as an example. It's a jumping-off point to reveal the universal essence, the eidos.
The eidos, like Plato's forms.
There are historical connections, but Husserl's approach is distinct. It's less about a separate world of forms and more about the essential structures of experience itself. It's a radical shift from focusing on this particular thing to understanding what makes any such thing possible in its fundamental nature.
Okay, let's try to make that less abstract. You used the chair example earlier.
Let's go back to it. Imagine you're looking at a specific chair right now. Empirical science might measure its dimensions, analyze its wood or metal, study how it degrades over time. Facts about this chair. But the phenomenologist, in the eidetic attitude, uses that specific chair not as an end in itself, but as a stepping stone. It's an example to help grasp the essence of chairness.
What makes any chair a chair universally, regardless of its specific material, design, location?
Exactly. What are the necessary features for something to count as a chair at all? This isn't generalization from experience, like noticing most chairs have 4 legs.
Yeah.
Empirical. Instead, it's an intuitive grasp of the fundamental, necessary structure that defines any possible chair. This eidetic seeing, as Husserl calls it, brings essences to originary, direct grasping.
It's like seeing the blueprint that makes all possible chairs possible, not just this one physical chair.
That's a very good way to put it. And this understanding leads to some key distinctions, vital for any science seeking true foundational knowledge.
Like what?
We differentiate between eidetic truths and experiential truths.
Okay, what's the difference?
Eidetic truths are absolutely binding, unconditioned necessities. Think geometry. A triangle has 3 sides. Or basic truths of perception. Every color has a specific hue and saturation. These are true regardless of whether a physical triangle actually exists right now or if we're currently seeing a specific color.
They are necessarily true, part of the definition or essence.
Yes. These truths are intransgressible ones, not to be confirmed or refuted by any experience. They are the necessary structures of possibility.
And experiential truths.
These are accidental, presumptive, and always subject to modification by further experience. Like, this specific chair is made of wood, or the sky outside is blue right now.
Facts about the world as it happens to be.
Exactly. They are valid only presumptively, subject to further experiential confirmation, always open to revision based on new facts or observations. Maybe the chair only looks like wood, or the sky changes color.
So eidetic truths. What must be for something to be what it is, the essential structure, experiential truths. What happens to be the case in the factual contingent world.
A critical difference for how we understand scientific knowledge and its claims. One gives us certainty about possibilities, the other gives us probable knowledge about actualities.
And the method for grasping these truths also differs.
Fundamentally, phenomenology relies on intuition, Inschauung in German. But this isn't just sensory experience. It's the direct seeing or grasping of essences. This can happen through exemplary intuitions, using a real example, or even fantasy intuition, using imagination.
Imagination plays a role. We'll get to that later, I bet.
We will. But the key is, it's distinct from experience, or forum, which posits factual existence. Think of geometers again. They use models, diagrams, drawings.
Not to discover facts about those specific drawings.
Right. But to facilitate the intuitive grasping of the essence of geometric forms, what a circle is in its pure form, not just what this particular wobbly drawn circle is. Similarly, the phenomenologist uses exemplary instances, whether actual or vividly imagined, to see essences. We use the particular to reveal the universal structure.
This means the phenomenologist's work isn't about collecting empirical data from the external world in the same way a natural scientist does. It's a different kind of seeing, an internal essential seeing.
That's right. It's a method that promises a different kind of certainty about essences, where empirical science by its very nature dealing with facts, can only offer probabilities or contingent truths.
But this approach, focusing on essences and intuition, it must put phenomenology in a somewhat critical, maybe even challenging relationship with the empirical sciences, doesn't it? Especially psychology, which Husserl seemed quite critical of.
He was, particularly the experimental psychology of his time. With his emphasis on eidetic science, Husserl argued that many empirical sciences often misunderstand or simply neglect their own foundational concepts.
They jump into experimenting without clarifying what they're actually studying.
That was his concern. He argued that phenomenology, as an eidetic science, provides the necessary groundwork that these sciences often lack. It's needed to clarify their fundamental concepts and methods before they even begin to experiment.
So what was his specific issue with psychology back then?
Well, that begs us to consider his critique. Husserl saw contemporary experimental psychology falling into what he called shallow naturalism.
Shallow naturalism.
Meaning it was blindly imitating physics. It focused heavily on measuring reactions, finding causal laws, running experiments, trying to find laws of the mind almost as the mind were just another physical object, like a billiard ball.
Without first asking, what is a mind? What is perception? What is memory, essentially?
Exactly. Without first performing rigorous eidetic analyses of psychic states, psychology, he argues, absolutely must distinguish between the psychic lived process as fact, what actually happens in a specific experiment with a specific person, and its peculiar essence as idea, what a psychic process like perception or memory is in its fundamental structure, universally.
So he wasn't dismissing their experiments entirely.
No, not at all. He wasn't disparaging their valuable experimental work. He acknowledged its findings. But he was fundamentally criticizing its methodology and its underlying assumption that it could achieve philosophical grounding, could truly understand its own subject matter, without first laying the phenomenological groundwork.
He used an analogy, didn't he?
Yes, a rather pointed one. He compared it to surgeons who perform great work, effective operations, but without fully understanding the underlying natural scientific theory of the body. Or engineers building bridges without mastering the fundamental principles of physics. They get results, but lack deep theoretical insight.
So good practice, but maybe shaky foundations.
That was his view. He lamented what he saw as a lack of philosophical feeling in younger psychologists of his day, who he felt were often overwhelmed by the sheer volume of experimental literature, leading to this unclear and superficial naturalism.
So his famous attack on experimental psychology, it wasn't about rejecting empirical science.
Not at all. It was a call for a deeper, more reflective approach to its own subject matter. He was essentially saying, know what you're studying at its core, in its essence, before you rush off to measure how it operates in specific instances. Ensure you have a solid conceptual foundation first.
What did phenomenology offer as an alternative, or rather a foundation?
Phenomenology, for Husserl, offers what he called a rational psychology. This isn't about being rational versus irrational. It means an eidetic doctrine of the psyche.
A science of the essence of the mind.
Exactly. Focusing on the essence of lived processes, their types, their interconnections, prior to any factual investigation. This rational psychology is not mathematics, but it's an eidetic theory connected to the regional a priori of the psyche, the necessary structures of mental life.
Can experiments still be useful then?
Oh, yes. In this context, experimental arrangements can be useful for phenomenology, but not for discovering factual truths about the world in the empirical sense.
How are they useful then?
They serve to help procure exemplary intuitions for eidetic seeing, like models for a geometer. An experiment might help you isolate a particular type of perception, for instance, making it easier to then intuitively grasp its essence, not just its factual occurrence in that setup. Experiments can help in the obtaining of intuitive material of the best sort, guiding your essential seeing.
So what does this all mean for us as listeners trying to understand the foundations of knowledge? If we're interested in science, what's the takeaway?
I think it means recognizing that merely observing and experimenting, while crucial, isn't the whole story for building truly rigorous science. You need to understand the essence of what you're studying first. You need to clarify its foundational concepts.
And phenomenology provides that systematic work.
That's the claim. Uncovering an infinity of truths for one of the great regions of experience. Truths that are valid in unconditional necessity for everything of this region that is experienceable. This essential groundwork, he believed, raises experiential science to a new level, much like geometry foundationalized physical natural science by providing a system of necessary truths about space and quantity.
Without this essential groundwork, empirical science risks building on shaky conceptual foundations. It might be effective, but not fully understand itself.
That's Husserl's core argument here.
This leads nicely into the next part, the method of clarification itself, making things distinct and clear.
Yes. All sciences, if they're going to be truly rigorous and avoid conceptual confusion, require clarification of their concepts and propositions. But for Husserl, this isn't a simple task. It's not just about defining terms. It's a multi-stage process.
And he makes a key distinction.
He does. He meticulously distinguishes between making a concept distinct within thought and making it clear through recourse to intuition. This foundational work of clarification, this work of elucidation and making evident, is what he declares as the maternal ground of all philosophical method.
The maternal ground. The source. Okay, let's peel back the layers here because this distinction between distinct and clear seems absolutely vital. What does it mean to make a concept distinct?
Making a concept distinct is a purely logical, analytical process within thought. It's about defining a term by breaking down its components and articulating them verbally, working purely with word significations.
Like a dictionary definition.
Pretty much. For example, defining a decahedron as a geometrical body completely bounded by 10 congruent plane surfaces. You're operating in the symbolic sphere of thought, using concepts merely symbolically as counters with which one operates, without recourse to intuition.
So you can think about it, analyze its definition, maybe deduce things from the definition, but you're not necessarily seeing or intuiting the decahedron itself.
Exactly. Think of having the dictionary definition of joy. You understand the words, you can list its components, perhaps positive emotion, high arousal, related to success or connection. That's making it distinct.
But making it clear is different.
Oh, yes. Making it clear involves something far more profound, something that brings us back to direct experience, to intuition. It means bringing that signification, that definition, into congruity with the noematic side of intuition.
Meaning you have to see it, visualize it, make it present to consciousness somehow.
Yes. To continue your joy analogy, making joy clear is when you vividly recall or imagine moments of profound joy, when you feel that emotion or sense its essence directly. When you grasp the full meaning of joy in an act of direct internal seeing, it requires actually grasping of essences in intuition.
So every part of the definition needs to correspond to something you can directly grasp intuitively.
That's the goal. The aim is that, to every partial concept derived by making distinct to Weber, there corresponds an explicit moment of the intuitive noema. Every component of your definition can be directly seen or grasped in consciousness.
And this can be challenging.
It certainly can be. Husserl notes that sometimes a conflict is produced by a measurement against corresponding intuition, where abstract thought concepts don't always fully align with how things are intuitively experienced.
Like, you might define something logically, but when you try to picture it or grasp it intuitively, it falls apart or seems contradictory.
Exactly. For instance, you might define a perfect circle logically as all points equidistant from a center. That's distinct. But to make that clear, you visualize it. You grasp its perfect roundness intuitively. If your definition implied something that you couldn't intuit consistently, like a round square, then there's a conflict, a problem that needs phenomenological clarification. The definition might be distinct, but it can't be made clear.
And Husserl identifies different stages or types of concepts that need this clarification process. It's not just for abstract things.
No, it applies across the board, showing the breadth of this method. He suggests we start with logical formal concepts, which are common to all sciences, things like identity, difference, unity, manifold, relation, foundational logical ideas.
Okay.
Then we move to regional formal concepts, which are specific to particular regions of reality. We discussed earlier concepts like physical thing, animate organism, psyche, the core concepts of the major domains.
Right.
And finally, there are material particularizations, which are the highly specific concepts within a particular science. Things like mineral, perception of color, neuron, economic inflation, sonnet, the everyday working concepts of specific disciplines.
So each layer requires its own meticulous process of making distinct definitions and then grounding them in clear intuition.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating here is that achieving perfect clarity for concepts originating from the sphere of reality, the world we experience, requires very complicated processes. It often involves that phenomenological kinetic tracking we hinted at.
Kinetic movement.
Yes. A thing concept, for example, isn't brought to clarity by merely seeing a thing from one angle. You have to follow the stages of its constitution in intuition. You trace the manifolds of sensory schemata, in relation to the manifold of schematized circumstances.
Meaning you have to mentally run through all the possible appearances, how it looks from different angles, how it feels, how it might change over time.
Exactly. You have to explore its profile of appearances and how they synthesize into a unity. This active exploration often reveals those conflicts where our neat thought concepts don't fully align with the messiness or complexity of intuitive experience, pushing us to refine our understanding.
What's the ultimate aim, then?
The ultimate aim is to bring the meant object to ever greater clarity, must be brought ever nearer, must be brought in the process of clarification to perfect self-givenness, a full, unclouded, exhaustive, intuitive grasp of the concept's meaning.
Perfect clarity, a full satiation of intuition, embracing the world of ideas in systematic completeness. That sounds like a monumental task.
It is. But this systematic work, this relentless pursuit of clarity, is where phenomenology truly shines, according to Husserl. It transforms our knowledge into what he calls genuine insight, into truth drawn from intuition, not just from logical deduction or empirical observation alone.
And this meticulous work of clarifying concepts and uncovering essences, it leads us right to the heart of consciousness itself, doesn't it? And how it actively constitutes the world we experience.
Precisely. It's not just a passive mirror reflecting reality. It's a dynamic, meaning-making agent.
Okay, section 3. Consciousness, constitution, and the pure ego. This feels like the core of the engine room.
It really is. So if phenomenology is about directly grasping essences and clarifying concepts, how does that actually happen? As you said, it's not just about describing what is, it's fundamentally about understanding how things come to be constituted as objects in our consciousness.
Constituted, meaning built or formed.
Yes, exactly. Every reality, from a simple physical thing like that cup to a complex psyche like your own, is constituted as a unity of manifolds in specific patterned ways within consciousness. It's a dynamic, active process, not a passive reception of pre-made objects floating out there.
So how does this constitution actually work? What's the mechanism?
That begs the question indeed. Husserl employs what he calls a phenomenological kinetic method. We keep coming back to that word kinetic.
Movement, flow.
Right. Unlike traditional ontology, which often takes objects as fixed, ready-made identities, what he calls a catastematic view, like looking at a static photograph, phenomenology traces the flows and movements in which these unities and their properties are formed.
It's about the process of construction, not just the finished product.
Exactly. It's a genesis, but not a genesis of facts in the world, like how a mountain formed geologically. It's a genesis of essences, of how meaning is built up layer by layer, starting from the primal sources in our experience. He vividly notes, every unity of cognition, in particular every real one, has its history, or also, correlatively speaking, the consciousness of this real thing has its history, its immanent teleology, in the form of a regulated system of essentially pertinent modes of manifestation.
Wow, okay. It's immanent teleology. That sounds complex.
It just means there's a directedness, a built-in goal within the process of perception itself. The goal is to arrive at a stable, unified object. Think of it less as seeing a finished sculpture, and more as observing the sculptor's hands, seeing the clay being shaped moment by moment.
Let's make this really concrete with some examples. The physical thing again, the tree.
Okay, the tree. The perception of a tree, as we touched on, isn't a singular, complete givenness, as if the entire 3D tree just pops in your mind at once.
Right. I only see one side at a time.
Precisely. Instead, it's an appearance from a specific perspective that implicitly directs us to more, to other possible perceptions. If you walk around the tree, you get different views, different profiles. If you touch it, you get tactile sensations. Your consciousness is actively synthesizing these multiple appearances into the enduring unity of the tree.
It anticipates the unseen sides.
Yes. This perception also points to an absolutely fixed framework for the course of possible experience. There are rules for how the appearances must unfold if it's truly a stable physical object.
Yeah.
Even in free fantasy, if you imagine a tree, it retains the universal physical thing form if it's still fantasized as a thing.
It still has sides, a location, properties, even if it's a weird imaginary tree.
Right. Our consciousness actively fills in the indeterminateness of what is initially meant by the perception, guiding us towards further possible perceptions that confirm and enrich our understanding of the object. It's a horizon of possibilities that our mind implicitly projects and explores constantly.
Okay, and what about the animate organism, the libe? How is that constituted?
Similarly, but with added layers. The libe is constituted as a localization field for specific sensations, meaning our body is experienced as the site where sensations happen. The pain is in my foot. The warmth is on my skin. This makes it distinct from a mere material thing prior to its full objective apprehension.
The awareness of sensation is key.
Absolutely. And kinesthetic sensations, the feeling of our own body moving freely versus passively, like you lifting your arm versus someone else lifting it for you, are crucial here. The perception of an animate organism involves a new basic form of experience where sensations are manifested as its sensitivities. This isn't just a layer of material reality, it's a higher stratum built upon material cognition, but adding this novel dimension of felt, lived experience from the inside.
So our consciousness synthesizes the visual appearance of, say, a moving hand with the felt experience of that movement from within our own body, constituting the hand as part of our lived body. So our consciousness isn't just a passive receiver, absorbing information like a sponge. It's incredibly active, deeply involved in constituting the objects we perceive, building them up as unities of manifolds from a dynamic stream of experiences.
That's the core message of constitution.
And this dynamic, ongoing process of constitution also applies to the very core of our being, the ego itself, which seems like the next logical step. Let's talk about noesis and noema. These are central terms in Husserl, aren't they?
Absolutely central. To understand this process of constitution and consciousness itself, we need to grasp Husserl's concept of intentionality.
Intentionality meaning the aboutness of consciousness, that our thoughts are always about something.
Exactly. Every act of consciousness, which Husserl calls noesis, is inherently directed towards something meant, which he calls the noema. To truly understand consciousness, we have to investigate this inseparable noesis-noema correlation.
So noesis is the act, noema is the object as intended.
You could put it that way. The noesis is the act of thinking, perceiving, judging, feeling, remembering, imagining. It's the subjective side, the how of the conscious act.
Yeah.
It has its own qualities. Is it a clear perception, a vague memory, a strong desire?
Okay. And the noema.
The noema is what is thought as such, what is perceived as such, what is experienced as such, is the objective content or meaning of the act, precisely as it appears in consciousness. It's the what that the act is about.
They're two sides of the same coin, then. You can't have an act of perceiving without something perceived as such.
Exactly. Inseparable.
Okay, but here's where it gets potentially tricky, right? Husserl warns us about something here.
He does. It's really interesting and a potential source of confusion if we're not careful. Husserl strongly warns us not to confuse the noema, the what is meant as such, the correlate of consciousness, with the actual essence of the object itself, or even with the object existing independently out there in the world.
So the perceived tree in my consciousness is not the same as the actual tree in the garden, or even the essence of treeness.
They are distinct, though obviously intimately related. A physical thing, as a correlate within consciousness, as a noema, is not identical to the physical thing existing objectively. Here's a great example. The noema of round rectangle.
A round rectangle? That doesn't exist.
Exactly. It can't exist as a coherent object or essence in reality because it's a contradiction. But the noema of round rectangle does exist as a logical signification, as a unity moment in consciousness. You can think of it, you can intend it, even define its contradictory properties.
So I can have a thought about a round rectangle, even if there's no possible round rectangle.
Precisely. The noema is the sense or meaning of the thing, as present to consciousness. The sense may or may not perfectly correspond to an actual consistent object or essence in the world. The noema is about the meaning, the intended object, not the object itself.
What does this imply for doing phenomenology? How does this distinction change the research approach?
It implies a really radical shift in perspective. As phenomenologists, Husserl says, we perform positings, that is, actual theoretical position takings directed exclusively toward lived processes, noesis, and lived process correlates, noema.
Not towards the objects themselves.
Not directly, not in the way an ontologist or a natural scientist would. The primary question for the phenomenologist is not what is the physical thing in its independent existence. That's for physics or ontology.
The phenomenologist asks.
The phenomenologist asks, how is the consciousness of the physical thing qualitied? Meaning, how does it present itself? What are its typical modes of appearing? How is its meaning built up in our experience? How does the noema tree come about through various noetic acts?
So we're investigating the appearances, the objectivations, through which objects present themselves to consciousness, not necessarily the objects themselves in their presumed independent being.
Exactly. Husserl is bracketing the question of the external object's ultimate reality to focus purely on the structure of the experience of that object.
It's about understanding the internal structure of conscious experience, the how of its directedness, rather than prematurely asserting the external what of the object itself.
Precisely. This meticulous distinction allows for a rigorous investigation of consciousness itself, its operations, its contents, as noemata, without falling into the naive trap of assuming its contents are simply identical with external reality. It keeps our focus squarely on the subjective pole of experience and its objective correlate within experience, which is phenomenology's unique domain.
This brings us back to the ego. We talked about the pure ego versus the empirical ego. Let's dive deeper into that, especially how the pure ego becomes embedded in the world.
Okay. We touched upon the pure ego earlier, that identical, indivisible, non-extendable one for every cogito, every act of thinking or experiencing. It's the silent witness, the constant subject pole of all our conscious acts.
The I think that can accompany all my thoughts.
Yes. But then Husserl describes this fascinating transformation where this pure ego undergoes a realizing apprehension. This is how it becomes the empirical ego.
Realizing apprehension, making it real. How does that work?
The pure ego receives an experiential relation. It becomes grounded in reality when it is apprehended as belonging to an experienced human being. It gets linked to a specific body, a specific life history in the world.
So the pure abstract I gets attached to this particular person, this body, this life.
Exactly. This realizing apprehension is what integrates the pure ego into the objective spatiotemporal world. It connects it to the animate organism, the Leib, and through that to material nature. It's how the inner flowing stream of consciousness, which is tied to the pure ego, becomes identifiable as a psychic state or a developing personality that exists in the objective world. It becomes an object for others, and even for oneself upon reflection.
So the empirical ego is the one that develops, learns, changes.
Precisely. The empirical ego, Husserl says, is no longer to be derived from every cogito as that which it is, but rather an ego that one must first get to know, and with the cognizance of which one never comes to an end.
You never fully know yourself in that empirical sense?
Right, because it's always acquiring new dispositions, constantly being shaped by its ongoing life in the world. This is the difference between the constant formal, I think, pure ego and the evolving, content-filled, who I am empirical ego.
So the pure ego is the constant I, the underlying subject. The empirical ego is the I embedded in the world, accumulating history, personality, dispositions, always in development.
A very good summary.
But this raises that crucial question again, the one that lies at the heart of our shared reality. How do we, multiple individual egos, constitute an objective world that we all inhabit and seem to agree upon? And maybe even more fundamentally, how do we constitute our own objective psyche that others can understand, or that we can understand ourselves? This sounds like the classic problem of intersubjectivity. How does Husserl tackle it here?
Absolutely. It's central, and he tackles it head on, especially using the concepts we've developed. Here, the role of empathy, Eindetung, becomes paramount again, but now applied to understanding other psyches, not just other animate bodies.
How does that work for understanding another mind?
The interpretation, Eindetung, of another's animate organism, seeing their gestures, hearing their words, observing their reactions, their meaningful expressions, leads us to posit another pure ego, with its own stream of consciousness and its own surrounding world.
So through their bodily expressions, we infer an inner life similar to our own.
Yes. We don't directly experience another's consciousness. We cannot literally be the other person or feel their thoughts. But we interpret their embodied actions and expressions, positing an alien pure ego with its non-removable physical thing, its own animate organism, much like we grasped the pain in the pricked animal earlier. We project our own capacity for inner experience onto the other's outward manifestation, based on analogy and context.
And this mutual interpretation leads to?
This leads directly to the concept of mutual understanding and the constitution of objectivity. Objective things, including objective psyches, are constituted not just by one isolated ego, but through the mutual understanding, agreement, communication, and reciprocal identification across multiple egos. It's a shared, iterative process of validation.
We build a shared world through interaction.
Precisely. As Husserl puts it, one's own psyche, as it is supposed to have objective factual existence in the objective world, is the constituted unity of a manifold of appearances, of objectivation, which are mere appearances, or whatever one wants to name them.
What does he mean by appearances there?
He means my understanding of your objective psyche, or even my understanding of my own objective psyche, my personality, my character as seen by others or myself. is built up from observing actions, reactions, expressions, the appearances, and from how others interpret and react to me, and how I interpret myself based on these interactions. It's a complex, shared construction, constantly being refined and validated by intersubjective consensus. My objective self is partly built through the eyes of others.
And how does time fit into this? How do we agree things happen simultaneously?
Crucially, the psychic's objective temporality is grasped only through its relation to the animate organism, which exists in objective space-time. This is essential for intersubjective understanding of simultaneous events.
My inner sense of now isn't enough.
Your imminent simultaneous, your purely internal experience of two thoughts happening at once becomes a manifestation of the objective simultaneous, because you can relate your internal experience to the objective temporal unfolding of your animate organism, which is publicly observable in shared space-time. This allows us to say, we both saw that happen at the same time.
Because our bodies were there at the same objective time.
Exactly. This is a significant point for Husserl. It is impossible to see how objective temporality of the psychic could legitimate itself otherwise than by relation to the animate organism. Our shared objective time and space, mediated through our bodies, provides the necessary anchor for intersubjective understanding of even the most private inner experiences occurring now or then.
Okay, so if we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, it means that even our deepest sense of self and the shared world we inhabit, they aren't simple givens, are they?
Not at all. They are incredibly complex constructions of consciousness, built through these intricate layers of apprehension, sensing the world, interpretation, empathy, understanding meaning, and mutual understanding, intersubjective agreement.
And this constitution of self and world isn't a static reality, it's an ongoing, dynamic process.
Absolutely. It's a process that phenomenology meticulously unpacks, showing us how we come to experience a common objective world, even though we start from distinct, private consciousnesses. It's quite a feat when you think about it.
This leads us perfectly into the final section, phenomenology's grand vision and its relationship to ontology. Because after detailing all this, Husserl makes some pretty bold claims, right?
He certainly does. This journey into the layers of reality and the intricate workings of consciousness leads him to proclaim phenomenology as the science of origins, the mothers of all cognition, and the maternal ground of all philosophical method.
Wow. The mother of all cognition, the maternal ground. That sounds incredibly ambitious. What does this truly mean for philosophy and for all the other sciences? Why does he make such a grand claim for its foundational role?
Well, the broader significance here is immense. Husserl sees phenomenology as fulfilling nothing less than the perennial philosophical quest, the need to clarify fundamental concepts rigorously. He argues that all sciences, even the most exact ones like mathematics or physics, build on concepts that are often, in his words, one-sidedly and incompletely clarified.
They use terms like cause, number, space, time, truth, perception.
Exactly. They use them effectively, but often without rigorously examining their ultimate meaning and origin in consciousness itself. Phenomenology, through its meticulous eidetic analyses and the method of clarification we discussed, provides the unconditional norm for all possible empirical cognition and for all concept formation.
How does it provide a norm?
By taking every philosophical problem back to its primal sources, meaning it traces every concept, every fundamental idea back to how it's constituted in direct intuitive experience. It reveals the essential structures that make those concepts possible and meaningful in the first place.
It's like discovering the fundamental grammar and logic that allows all other intellectual languages, the languages of physics, biology, psychology, even everyday life, to be spoken meaningfully.
That's a great way to capture it. It's not just another branch of philosophy or science, but the foundational discipline that underpins all others, providing their necessary conceptual bedrock.
So it can clarify the concepts of other sciences.
Yes. It can interpret and elucidate the fundamental concepts and theorems of what Husserl calls dogmatic sciences, sciences that work within a set framework like geometry or physics. Phenomenology can trace concepts like line or force back to their constitutive origins in our spatial or causal intuition. It helps us understand the very sense or meaning of their concepts rather than just using them as effective, perhaps unexamined tools.
And this connects to his critique about the poverty of science.
It does. It connects to his profound critique, what he refers to as the poverty of science, a sentiment that arguably resonates even today. He warns that despite all the incredible advances in science, all the technological progress, we haven't necessarily gained corresponding treasures of insight. in the most profound sense.
The world hasn't become more intelligible, just more useful.
That's exactly how he puts it, quite starkly. The advances of science have not enriched us in treasures of insight. The world is not in the least more intelligible because of them. It has only become more useful for us.
That's a powerful, provocative challenge. Is he suggesting that for all our scientific marvels, quantum mechanics, brain mapping, we might be becoming incredibly proficient at how things work, but potentially losing sight of what they fundamentally mean or why they matter in a deeper human sense?
That seems to be precisely his concern. Are we trading profound understanding for mere efficiency or utility? He uses the analogy we mentioned. Like having an incredibly powerful engine, but not fully comprehending the fundamental physics that makes it work, or perhaps the existential purpose it serves.
We get effective tools, accurate predictions, powerful explanations.
But without phenomenology, Husserl argues, we might be using them without truly understanding the deep meaning of their own foundational concepts that ultimately originate in our very experience of the world. True knowledge, for him, is insight, and insight is truth drawn from intuition, which phenomenology aims to provide by guiding us back to their origin, which demands insight and rigorous validity.
And this clarification process covers all levels.
Yes, from the logical formal concepts common to all sciences, through the regional formal concepts defining broad domains, down to the material particularizations specific to individual sciences. This systematic, methodical work is what transforms mere utility into genuine insight, guiding us toward a deeper, more complete understanding of reality and our place within it.
Let's revisit that distinction between kinetic phenomenology and katastematic ontology. That seems crucial to this grand vision.
It is, absolutely. We've touched upon it, but it's vital when considering phenomenology's role. Remember the distinction. The kinetic or genetic mode of phenomenology versus the katastematic mode often associated with traditional ontology.
Katastematic, like static, fixed.
Yes. Ontology, in its traditional sense, often takes unities as fixed identities. It aims to describe the essence of mind or of nature purely and completely, able to fix the axiomatic principles that belong to it. It describes what something is in its static essential form, like a finished blueprint.
So an ontologist might strive to define the essence of mind as a fixed thing, maybe a substance with certain properties describing its unchanging nature.
Right. But a phenomenologist, operating kinetically or genetically, wouldn't just describe what the mind is statically. Instead, they would investigate the history of how the mind, or rather the consciousness of the mind, is constituted in dynamic, regulated systems of manifestation.
It's about the process, the becoming, the flows in which these unities are formed, not just the static being itself.
Exactly. Husserl emphasizes this. The phenomenological constitutive consideration takes the unity in the flow, namely as unity of a constitutive flow. It follows up the movements, the flows in which such unity in every component side, real property of such unity is the correlate of identity. You're watching the river flow and sculpt the landscape, understanding the dynamic process rather than just mapping the static riverbed after the water's gone.
How do these two approaches relate then? Is one better?
It's more about complementary roles, but with phenomenology having a foundational priority for Husserl. To put it in a wider context, while ontology describes what is, in essence, the katastematic view, phenomenology is the rigorous method that educates us to complete seeing, providing the full eidetic grasp of reality, including its constitution, the kinetic view, which is necessary for grounding ontology itself.
So phenomenology provides the foundation for ontology.
That's Husserl's claim. They're deeply intertwined. But he sees phenomenology often devouring all ontologies in its comprehensive scope. Not by refuting them necessarily, but by revealing their axiomatic roots, where their fundamental concepts come from, and the very structure of consciousness, and how those concepts are constituted. Phenomenology essentially establishes the maternal ground from which all ontological insights grow, showing how these essential structures come to be known and validated.
It's the dynamic investigation that provides the foundation for any static description of being.
Precisely. But Husserl adds a note of caution here, a distinction we should keep in mind. We shouldn't confuse phenomenological species formations with type differentiations.
Species versus types, what's the difference?
Geometry, as an eidetic doctrine, deals with pure species, perfect, idealized forms like a perfect square or circle. These are fixed, precisely defined, often derivable from axioms. But phenomenology also grapples with types, like an egg shape, or maybe a typical chair.
Things we recognize intuitively but aren't perfectly defined.
Exactly. An egg shape is an intuitive unity that we can grasp. We recognize it immediately. But geometry, Husserl notes, provides no systematics of these sensory and ideally stated types, and no law for such types. It's not a geometrically exact formation that can be deduced from axioms in the same way a square is.
So phenomenology deals with both exact essences, species, and these more intuitive, less precise structures, types.
Yes, and this highlights phenomenology's unique domain and its different kind of rigor. The type is an intuitive unity we grasp through eidetic seeing, but it might not lend itself to mathematical formalization. Phenomenology operates in a realm of descriptive and direct insight, where geometry relies more heavily on deduction from axioms. It respects the intuitive, lived character of many of our basic concepts, while still demanding a rigorous, systematic uncovering of their essences.
So its rigor comes from direct, systematic eidetic seeing, even when dealing with these manifold genera and species which one could not somehow grasp mathematically?
That's the idea. That's a different kind of foundational work.
Okay, this brings us to maybe one of the most surprising and honestly liberating aspects for someone learning about this. Husserl emphasizes the absolutely critical role of fantasy imagination in eidetic research.
Yes, fantasy intuition.
Why is creative imagination so incredibly important for a rigorous science that is seeking absolute, universal truths about essences?
It seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? We usually think of science as sticking to the facts, not imagination.
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance. But that begs us to consider what fantasy truly means here for Husserl. It's not just idle daydreaming.
What is it then?
The freedom of shaping offered by fantasy gives the eidetic investigator an unparalleled ability to run through freely and on all sides the endless manifolds of possibilities. While actual experience provides concrete examples, sometimes limited ones, fantasy allows us to vary essences without being tied to the constraints of factual existence.
How does varying help find the essence? By freely experimenting in our imagination, changing properties, pushing boundaries, we can see what remains constant, what is necessary versus what is merely accidental or contingent. It helps us isolate the core, unchanging structures that define something's essence. Husserl states quite beautifully that in this context, fantasy can therefore still rule freely enough. It can no longer pose as world destroyer, but only as world builder.
World builder, how so?
It constructs possibilities within the framework of essence, rather than simply reflecting or destroying the actualities we see around us.
So you don't necessarily need a lab full of expensive equipment to do phenomenology. Your imagination is in many ways your most powerful tool for seeing essences.
In many ways, yes. You can, in your mind, invent new senses or new qualities for the old senses, creating the most incredible deformities of things, the wildest physical specter, scorning all physics and chemistry.
Imagine a liquid square, or a sound that is also a color.
Exactly. Push the boundaries. And yet Husserl argues, even in these wildest variations, if you're still imagining it as a thing, the universal physical thing form remains. It will still have some kind of extension, some boundaries, some way of potentially interacting causally. This imaginative process helps to reveal the absolutely fixed framework for possible experience, what must be true for any imagined thing of that kind to be that kind of thing.
It's like stress testing a concept in your mind to find its unbreakable core. What can't be changed without destroying the concept itself?
That's a perfect analogy. What persists through all the variations, that's likely part of the essence.
But is imagination enough? Can it be misleading?
Husserl acknowledges that. While fantasy offers this unparalleled freedom, it can also be vague. As he says, it quickly loses its fullness. It sinks into the semi-clear and the dark. Our imaginative grasp might lack the detail and stability of direct perception.
So what does the phenomenologist do then?
While fantasy is a powerful tool for exploring possibilities, the phenomenologist will always seek the primal source of clarity from fully living impression whenever possible, from actual vivid experience. Even using experimental arrangements, as we discussed, can help procure exemplary intuitions that are of the best sort to ground our imaginative explorations and make them clear.
Like the geometer's models.
Exactly. The models or diagrams aren't the truth themselves, but they are aids for the grasping of essence that happens intuitively. The imagination provides the vast canvas for infinite variations, but clear perception provides the anchor, the source of ultimate clarity and certainty.
So the infinite possibilities of fantasy allow us to explore the complete structure of consciousness and its fundamental constitutions. It gives us insights into an infinity of possibilities that precedes actuality.
Just as geometric possibilities precede physical actuality. Yes, it's a powerful, deeply personal, and surprisingly creative method for uncovering universal, necessary truths about how we experience and understand the world. Not just what is, but what must be.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, haven't we? This has been a real deep dive.
It really has. Husserl packs a lot into Ideen third.
Absolutely. From Husserl's foundational distinctions, material things, animate organisms, psyches, each with its own unique way of being, its own causality, its corresponding science.
To the profound power of the eidetic attitude and eidetic intuition.
Right, grasping essences, and the critical role of conceptual clarification, making things distinct, and, crucially, making them clear through intuition.
And then diving into consciousness itself, constitution, noesis, noema, the pure and empirical ego, intersubjectivity.
And finally, the surprising freedom and importance of fantasy in philosophical inquiry. It's been quite a journey. We've seen how phenomenology offers this deep, rigorous path to understanding the essences of reality and consciousness.
And in doing so, reveals the very foundations of science itself.
So if we had to connect this to the bigger picture one last time, what's the core insight? What's the main takeaway from Husserl here?
I think the core insight is that by meticulously investigating the structures of our own experience, how things are constituted in consciousness, how meaning is built layer by layer, we gain something more than just knowledge about the world.
What do we gain?
We gain a profound understanding of how knowledge is possible in the first place. Phenomenology isn't just another science competing with physics or psychology. It's what Husserl calls the science of origins for all knowledge.
The maternal ground.
Exactly. Providing the unconditional norm for all empirical cognition, giving us the conceptual bedrock upon which all other disciplines can, ideally, stand firm and understand their own foundations.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day? Here's a final provocative thought to maybe mull over. Next time you look at a simple object, like a tree, or even reflect on your own complex feelings, anger, joy, whatever, consider this. What essence is being constituted in your consciousness right now? How is that experience being built?
And maybe ask, how much of what you think is simply given to you, just passively received, is actually a complex, layered construction, a product of your unique way of experiencing, interpreting, and making sense of the world?
Husserl called the pure ego and pure consciousness the wonder of all wonders. And phenomenology invites you to transform that initial wonder, that immediate sense of being and knowing, into a systematic, foundational science, into genuine insight.
This deep dive, of course, offers just a glimpse into the immense scope and profound implications of Husserl's thought in Ideen III. It's incredibly rich. We truly encourage you to reflect on these ideas. Think about how they challenge your assumptions about reality, about science, and maybe even about your own mind.
There's always more to learn, isn't there?
Always. And critical thinking, questioning assumptions, constantly considering different viewpoints. These are absolutely essential tools for navigating the rich, complex, and sometimes overwhelming world of information and ideas. Phenomenology offers one powerful way to hone those tools.